Hello, everyone. Welcome to our webinar, Advanced Interviewing Strategies, Build Confidence in Your Interview Skills. My name is Alex Barampuria. I'm with IExec, and before I introduce our presenter for today, Sarah Stambouli, I wanted to very quickly just go over a few logistical items just to make sure that all of the entire webinar does in fact run as smooth as possible. We will be actually, just to give you guys all the heads up, we are going to be recording the full webinar. So there's really no need for you to rush and write down every single detail that Sarah shares with us. We will be sending you a link to both the video and the audio. So you will have the full presentation as a follow-up. So just be aware of that. And one thing to also note in regards to the audio for today, if you are experiencing any audio issues, hopefully you are able to hear me, and if you are experiencing any audio issues, there is a chat box as well as a questions bar that you can use to send us any questions that you have as we're going through the webinar in regards to the audio. You'll probably have noticed that you have either the option to use your voice over IP over your computer or to dial in directly with the number provided to you during registration. So if you do have any trouble with the audio, please let us know, and we'll do everything we can on our end to make sure that the quality is as sound as possible. We have also muted everyone today just to ensure that the sound quality while Sarah is talking is really good. But at any point, we actually encourage you to ask us questions. And any questions that you do have for Sarah in regards to the content that she's sharing, please do use the questions box. There's a questions bar on your control panel. And I will actually be monitoring that as we go through the presentation as Sarah is talking. And then at opportune moments when there's an opportunity for us to share those questions, I'll actually share those questions with Sarah. So please do send us the questions. I encourage any question that you have. No question is too unimportant or not worth asking. So be aware of that. And also, just to keep you, giving you the heads up, we are actually going to be launching a few interactive poll questions near the beginning of the webinar. So that'll give Sarah a really good understanding of who's on the webinar today and what she can do to try to tailor the presentation to your specific needs. So we do ask that you provide your input for those poll questions. And I think that's about it. So with that, I'm going to go and introduce Sarah Stambouli. Sarah Stambouli is a regular contributor here for us at IExec, and I'm sure many of you who have participated in some of our previous webinars were fortunate enough to have Sarah present. And in terms of her experience, what she brings to the table, she actually heads up Sarah Stambouli Career Consulting, which is a business which specializes in providing comprehensive career services to MBA alumni particularly, but not exclusively. And Sarah's prior roles do include leading alumni career services at Columbia Business School. She, I believe, is also a fellow alum from Columbia, and she's also headed human resource organizations at companies such as Morgan Stanley, Cantor Fitzgerald, as well as Nortel Networks. And so we're certainly very, very thrilled to have Sarah here again with us for our webinar. And as a follow-up, we will certainly share more information in regards to Sarah's career coaching services, which many of our members here at IExec have been able to sign up for and have really benefited from. And so I certainly encourage you to explore and a little bit more about Sarah post-webinar. So with that, Sarah, I'm actually going to hand it over to you to begin our presentation.
Okay. Hi, everybody. I'm really glad to be presenting on this topic, the art of interviewing, build confidence in your interview skills. And what we're really going to be focusing on some of the ways that people that are pretty strong interviewers can make themselves even better. So we will be covering some basic points, but we're going to be also focusing on the part where you go from good to great. So I think that even if you're a pretty good interviewer, you'll get something out of this. That's the hope, and in any case. And Alex, if you want to start with the poll questions, just to do the background, that sounds great.
Sure, absolutely. Let me go ahead and launch the four. We have 4 questions. I'm going to go ahead and launch the first one. The first question is, are you currently employed full-time? If you could just select yes or no, and we'll go ahead and share the results with the audience. couple more seconds here. We close it. Great. So it turns out that 74% of our attendees today are not currently employed full-time. 26% are. And I'm going to go ahead and launch the second poll question. The second poll question asks, how would you describe yourself as? Would you consider yourself an active job seeker who's actively looking to make a move, or perhaps a passive job seeker who's just looking to keep an eye on what's going up there in the job market? Okay. Looks like everyone's chimed in. And for this question, it turns out that 88% of our attendees are active job seekers, which is interesting. And the third poll question, how many years of experience do you actually bring to the table? Do you currently possess? And you could just select one of the following: 1 to 5 years, 5 to 10, 10 to 15, or 15 plus. Looks like everyone's getting pretty good at answering quickly. It looks like we're just a little, actually about 45% of our attendees have over 15 years of experience. And then right behind that are professionals with 5 to 10 years at 34%. A small percentage, 10 to 15, 12% of our folks here tonight have 10 to 15 years of experience. And then 9% of our attendees have 1 to 5 years of experience. And finally, the last question that's more directed towards tonight's presentation: how good of an interviewer are you? This will give you an opportunity to assess your interview skills, if you will. Would you consider so great right now? Great. And it looks like, Sarah, I know you can't see the results, but about 72% of our attendees would describe themselves as decent interviewers, 24% not so great, and just a couple, 4% of our members, of our attendees would describe themselves as experts. So with that,
Okay, that sounds great. Could you just give me the results of the first two one more time, just what the most common category was?
Absolutely. The first question was, are you currently employed full-time? 74% said no.
Okay.
The second question, how would I describe myself as? 88% would describe themselves as active job seekers.
Okay, great. Thank you. All right. Well, let's get started, everybody. It sounds like if maybe, I know that not everyone may want to be employed full-time, but there's lots of you that are in an active full-time search probably, so this will be very topical. So I just want to hide, my screen is being, okay, so I guess I'm not going to be able to see notes from you guys, so you're going to have to just tell me, because I'm going to need to hide the control panel here to see things. Okay, so I thought we'd start with, this is very basic, but it's actually can be very helpful. A great interview can sometimes start with when it's set up, and it's very important to not, in your excitement at the call or getting the news that you have an interview, to just kind of go think great and sort of hop off the phone or not finish the conversation. Because in order to research the person or the people you'll be interviewing, you need to know who they are. And it's just good to get a little extra information on the phone with whomever's calling if possible. So if it's an assistant, to get their name and their role with the company, to get some more information. If it's a recruiter or an HR person calling, to ask a little bit more information, get them to email you a job description. And then sometimes they'll just say you'll be meeting with one person, but they actually are planning a slate of interviews. So to ask about that, oh, who will I be meeting with? Actually get the spelling of their name, sometimes that's a challenge, and find out their role. And then if the person seems at all friendly, I would actually try and get them to talk, sort of say, oh, so do you know her? What's she like? Blah, 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 and anything you can learn in that call could be helpful. And then again, it seems very basic, but you want to confirm the address because it certainly could be that almost all the company for American Express say is downtown, but this could be one group that's somewhere else, and if you didn't think to ask. And also, if it's a morning appointment, try and get somebody's cell phone number just in case you're sick or they are, for that matter, and exchange those. Okay, I'm not able to move my screen. Oops. I'm not sure.
You might have to, can you use your mouse, Sarah? If you just click on your mouse, it might.
Okay, all right, there we go. So as I mentioned, almost everybody knows that you're supposed to research the company before the interview. But the big added tip is to really research the people you'll be meeting with, and in quite a bit of detail. So I would suggest that you look them up on LinkedIn, but don't stop there. If they're senior, you might be able to find them on the website of the company. But also just Google them and don't just read the first page of the results, read the second. They have a very common name. It's a little harder, but you can usually put in some keywords like company name or where they went to school to get the right person if it's a common name. And I would try and find out anything you can about them. Sometimes you can't get a lot of information. You'll see they have a Facebook account. But even if you can just see a picture, it can just help prepare you mentally for the interviews so that you can go in as sort of friendly and upbeat as you can. And then, of course, research the company. And it's also very important to research the position. The more you know about what XYZ people do in their job all day, the better you're going to do. And again, that's an area I think people underwork or whatever. So sometimes I'll ask people when they're going for an interview what they think that person does all day, and they don't actually know. And you can really interview so much better if you completely understand the job responsibilities. And sometimes the problem is that people are working so hard to get meetings with potential hiring managers that you might skip the really important stage of getting meetings with more junior people that actually do the job that you want. So you can really find out the details about what's easy, what's hard, what makes for a star in that role, etc. So you always read these statistics about what people notice or what makes for good first impression. And I don't know about you, but I sometimes suspect they're just making it up. And I have no particular evidence that any of this is true, but I liked what it said, and it kind of went with what I believe to be true. And I particularly like this set of percentages because of the second one. So if packaging is 45%, what I think they mean by that is the stuff that you have influence over this week. So that would be what you look like, how you're dressed, how you're presenting your experience in your resume, how you're speaking, and what kind of research you do for the interview. So those are all things you have control over for the most part. And it's very, very important, every one of them, and we'll talk about that. The second one is the responsiveness, and this is huge, and this is the area that I think can bring someone from good to great a lot of the time. Responsiveness is completely adjusting what you say and how you say it based on the person you're interviewing with. So really adjusting yourself to what they're interested in, what they need, their style, and what appears to be particularly important to them about this exact job, adjusting it to this exact job as opposed to just doing a great pitch or talking about your successes the same way you do on any interview. Your experience here, they're saying, is 10%. So that would actually be the content of your resume as opposed to how you're presenting it. Not even content of your resume, but actually your work history. And then miscellaneous. So under your control are the packaging and the responsiveness for sure. So first impressions. Obviously we know about good appearance is huge. We can't make ourselves all beautiful, but we can make ourselves all dress fashionably and well and very well, pressed and groomed. The voice, I think, is one of these things that we can't change on the spot, but is an area that I think people have a lot of leverage in, especially those of you that are young, and if you have an accent that isn't ideal for where you'll be working, whether that be your career, you're planning your career in a country that isn't your country of origin, so you have just what's considered a foreign accent, or you have a not ideal regional accent, or you just have a voice that isn't, so gorgeous, which I would say about mine as well. It's really worth putting in the time to get some vocal coaching or voice lessons or both if you think that it might be a problem. And the thing with that is it's one of those things that you might not always know. People might not always be willing to tell you. And I'd actually gotten some feedback about doing vocal coaching, and it's a lot of work. I actually, was not very good at sticking with the exercises, but it's, I think it's very much worth it. It's important to your career. Confident, open body language, friendliness. We'll be talking about that a lot. Friendliness is much more important than you think, even at a senior level, even for men. I think the senior people and men are more likely to underplay that or think that they're going to look silly if they're very friendly. But actually, it just comes across strong and confident in an interview. And having a tremendous amount of interest in the interviewer and enthusiasm. Those three are things that I'm constantly asking some very senior people to turn up. And when they, for instance, when I film people interviewing and they see themselves on film, they realize how important that is and how they don't look goofy doing it. They just look great and they look like someone you want to hire. So I started to go over some appearance tips. These may seem basic, they may seem weird, but these are the things that I find myself talking to my clients about the most. Number one is really important in the U.S. and one that I kind of have to, practically, I jokingly fight with people over. Often when men wear jewelry, it's because someone they love, maybe someone who passed away, gave it to them, and it's a common thing to wear maybe in their culture. But in the U.S., if you have a chain around your neck or around your wrist or anything along those lines, and you're not in a very unusual field, it just doesn't look right. And it really, that kind of thing is very symbolic, and it can really hurt a job search. So I implore you to take it off. And also to upgrade the bag. I'm constantly talking to my older clients about, it's not there's anything wrong with longer hair, it's that older clients with longer hair, it's the ones making them look older, and kind of emphasizing that. Also, modern glasses are very important. Again, that's something that some of the older guys that I work with, and they're always amazed at what kind of compliments they get if they get more modern styles. Also, facial hair has just got to be current. So there's no hard and fast rule. Clean shaven is always safe. I think very few people can get away with anything that isn't very modern. So I think clean shaven is the safest. For instance, there's not a lot of people who can get away with just a mustache. That's just one that's not a good one. And I love doing this as a webinar because you will know I'm not looking at you thinking that, even if it is you. And yeah, I like the little, people think in the first interviews, it's just not a good time to express individuality in how you look. It's really good to look as conservative and boring as possible, I think, unless you're in a very creative field. Because something that becomes charming and expressive in the second or third or fourth meeting sometimes can look weird in the first meeting, and that's just something to be very aware of. It's always safe to not try and stand out in appearance. And then for women, the thing that I probably say the most is for women to get more fashionable shoes and higher heels. And I always laugh, but it's not about comfort. So just a few more details here, little things, but these are the things I know that people struggle with. And it's always tough if you're a little penny pinched because you're job hunting and you need to get some new clothes. I think it's most important that your clothes fit well and just look new, and it's not necessarily that important that they be very expensive as long as they're well-fitting and they're the appropriate type of thing. So, and again, this is basic stuff, but we've all had it happen. You're running late and you just can't find the building. You know, like it's one of those weird things like 4 times square. That was or 6 times square or something. That could just be anywhere, honestly. So I'm telling you right now, if you get one of those addresses, call and find out where it is, exactly where it is ahead of time. You know, do the rundown of the commute and really plan out every little thing, because it's horrible when you realize, like, you know, the shoes you're going to wear are worn out because you've been on an interview for a long time, or, you know, your briefcase isn't. And of course, be optimistic. You know, you might need a second outfit for your second interview. I think beyond that, you know, you can often just juggle your clothes and change the tie or the blouse with certain shoes and stuff. And, you know, you don't need to have a million interview outfits. But anybody have any questions so far?
Yes, sir. We have a couple in regards to research, actually. One is for company research. One of the attendees asked, to what extent is the interviewee expected to know all about the company? Should they know everything all the way down to their annual report, their past deals, their product lines, et cetera? So kind of where do you draw the line on that?
I think it varies a bit in how senior you are. So if you're just out of school, I think you should know, you're interviewing for an entry-level marketing job, you should know what marketing is. You should know the basics that are on their website. So I think you should have definitely read the easy to find stuff you should have read, and you should know something about the area you're interviewing in. So if it's marketing, a company, you should know something about their marketing campaigns. If it's something obvious so that you could know. So if you're interviewing at Verizon, you should know what the latest Verizon ads were. If you're interviewing for a financial position and they're a public company, or they're easily available to get the information, you should know how they're doing. And how they're doing, how detailed, would depend on how senior you are. So if you're going to interview for a CFO thing, you should know everything you could know. If it's an entry-level job, a little less. I think it's also very important that you just understand what someone does in that job, and that would almost clarify how much you would need to know. But I think definitely they expect you to have read everything that's easy to find on their website. Not every word and every detail of the annual report. And again, it also depends what kind of firm. So a large firm, they expect more in terms of that kind of detail, and they expect you to just know about them. You know, this doesn't everyone, kind of.
Yeah, great. And then another question that's very much related, but in relation to researching the position, the attendee actually asked, and the individual is actually preparing for an interview with a company that kind of fits this kind of profile. They basically don't have a specific position, but are looking to develop that, you know, specific function that doesn't necessarily exist. So what can they do in terms of research for that, if that role has never been with the company in the past?
Well, I was just trying to learn about that function. So if, let's say, they're hiring somebody to do fundraising in South America for a hedge fund, and they've never done that, I would just try and find someone who does that for another company, or does that kind of work for another company, and try and talk with them, who their competition is, just to understand the job in general, even though they're not positive what level it would be. And then that interview should be a very exploratory interview where you're trying to get them talking about what they need, and we'll be talking about that a lot. But I think you just research what you can, and ideally you try and find someone who's doing that job, and you interview them. It's a great way to prepare. And we're working at least that kind of department so they can explain. So if you're interviewing to do some role on a fixed income desk at a bank, you don't even know what they want you for. If they want you for research, they want you for trading, or they want you for sales. I would at least have some idea what trading, research, and sales does in that kind of department. And then you might even have an opinion that you'd be better at trading and research than them. And try and talk to someone who does it, even if it's just a phone call to prep a bit.
Sounds great. Sounds great.
Okay. So it's very important to remember that the goal of the interview is not to seal the deal or to get a job offer. That probably only happens, and I'm not even sure if it works there at McDonald's, that you go in for the first interview and they hire you, or they don't hire you right then there on the spot. You're just trying to get another meeting, so that you just have to make them like you enough to get another meeting. And that sort of takes the pressure off, you know, and it also can help focus how to be in the meeting. So you're trying to get another meeting, you're trying to just learn about what they need. You're trying, it's really the best thing you can come away from this webinar knowing is that it's not about you. The job interview is not about you. It's about them and their needs. And the part about you is only whether or not you can help. And anything you say should be tailored to their needs, and you will be a step ahead of all the other candidates if you get that. It's not about you. You want to learn what solution would work for them, what ones are, and then you want to help them find that solution, even if it isn't you. That's sort of the mindset you want to go in there for. You're exploring what they need with that. So some metaphors, you know, it's kind of you're just trying to get another meeting. Is you're on a first date, you would love to get a second date. So if you're trying to get a beautiful girl to marry you, you know, like anyone really does that exactly, but accept your proposal on the first date. You're just trying to get another date. Another way to look at the interview is you're a psychologist trying to draw out a patient to make a diagnosis. Tell me more. A lot of what you should be saying is answering a question maybe, but then throwing it back to them, getting them to talk, almost like it's a tennis match. Or account manager at a major consulting firm, and you've got all these resources, and all you're doing is having that initial interview to find out what they need, and then you're going to send over the right consultant. Hopefully, it will be you. You'll fit the need of what they want. This is one that I would say a lot. This is the thing that I talk to the most clients about is unconditional positivity. And all my clients say, no, I'm very positive. And then when we actually practice, we do a lot of practice. We practice one-on-one and we practice in a group. We did this morning. Constantly, other clients are saying, explaining that they don't sound as positive as they think. So this morning our topic was how to talk about the last 2 years of your career. Because so often when people are, you know, seeking a career coach, it's because the last, you know, their recent job history hasn't been super. They're having a little trouble finding a job and they need a little bit of extra help. So we're practicing specifically talking about the last couple of years, which for many people in this economy were not great, and in a very positive way. And so everyone was taking turns practicing. Well, how many negative things slipped out? And so we would have people that would just comment about, you know, you said the word unfortunately 3 times, or, you know, you said like 4 things in a row that were, it's a negative thing that you were describing, but you just need to get through it quicker or skip over it as much as possible. Because it just, people want to hire, but I always kind of joke, it sounds like it's a Mr. Rogers show. People want to hire key winners, and picturing me shaking my head like a goofball when I'm saying that. But people do want to hire happy people. They want to hire lucky people. Luck. On some weird level, like on some unconscious level, it's almost like we don't believe in luck. And so we think that people that have had bad things happen to them, somehow they're responsible so that it can't happen to us. You know, it winds up being a bit of a blame the victim thing. He, you know, appears to be very lucky. We often credit them with good judgment or good judgment or hard work or being very good at what they do. And present yourself as if you're a fortunate person who good things happen to. And even if humanity wasn't so great, you're still putting it in a positive light. You want to smile as much as possible. This is nice to let me film them and then look back and they see that they actually look great smile. You know, sometimes, again, men sometimes think they look, you know, they just look silly smiling. Guys, how important it is. A lot of the reason for this is we're very used to watching people on TV. And on TV, you get hired to host shows or news anchors, etc., have faces that are very positive. They almost look a bit smiley compared to regular people. Regular people can look very dour. themselves on film, they often say to me, oh, I look so sad, or I look so angry, or wow. You see when they smile, they look more like the people on TV. They have that positive look in their face. And so we're used to seeing that. If we're we have one set of eyes on and everybody looks normal. But in an interview, by definition, it's kind of what they're there to do. And so they have a little bit of a different criteria. And so suddenly they expect like a performance, a little bit more like what they see on TV. And hence the importance of smiling and being very positive. Another thing that can actually, if you're not naturally a very positive person, is to begin each answer with a broad-based positive statement about the subject of your answer. Now, people are always like, huh, what are you talking about? Emotion and nerviness, especially on anything that's tricky. So let's say I got fired because my boss was a big jerk. Okay, that's how I interpret it. A great thing to say on an interview. So what I might say when they ask, oh, why did you leave Google? I might say, oh, I loved working there. The reason I left was, but as soon as I say all those positive emotional things, anchored at a positive place. So then what I'm likely to say about why I leave is going to be probably more positive. The question will be that I'm a positive, upbeat person. It's very important that you speak the reason positively about your former employer is that the interview with you, they're identifying with your boss because they're debating whether to hire. They're thinking, if you speak positively about your boss, it's like you're speaking positively about them. At your company, they're gonna almost feel like it's the way you'll be about that. This is another one. It doesn't mean that you won't get the job if you don't do this, but if you bend shoulders to front ahead of a lot of other people. Please talk too much. They actually think about them, which is a normal thing to think, because that's supposed to be more like that. But the standards are a little bit higher at ours. And it's very important that you keep tailored to the job, because people think in sound. If you're talking too much early, what we're looking for. And so,
Sarah, it's Alex. A couple of people messaged that they're having issues with the audio. I'm not sure. I know you're on speaker. Is it possible? Either dial in or just to a microphone, or perhaps maybe just.
I'll just remember. I have it logged out now.
Let me see here. See if I can do it directly. I will see if I can send it to you in the text.
I have to get out of here. I can't see the text box. I was just, if you could just send it to me in the text box. I got it now.
Okay. But if you could just maybe.
Sure. Perfect. Talking less than half the time. It's a bit of a technique to turn the conversation over to them. A lot of the interviewers are a little bit easier talking about the job, but with a recruiter, with an outsource, I would more or less give up to try and get them to tell you as much as possible, manager, and certainly start with a lot of small talk. And with HR within the company, it'll be a little harder. Manager, you really should be able to get them talking a lot about the work and the job. Their job and their concerns. It's also important never to grow. So if they ask you a question that takes a bit of time to answer it, then I would. But what I would do is and give them time to redirect. Because what you don't want a long answer, and it's not what they meant, and fabulous what you're saying is. If you've lost them, like they stopped listening because it's not what they meant, they get in this state where they're not listening acting anymore. And you really want to avoid that. And at any point in the interview process, if you feel like it's not going well, you've blown it in some way, you just don't know how you're saying something that isn't ideal, you want to bring it back to the job. And so then just figure out some way to turn the conversation back around to the job. Because the job, you're not dissecting your resume in that time back in '94 when you were unemployed and what exactly happened back then, which is an interview. I'm not seeing a number. Oh, there. I think I do see it. Sorry, I was looking for it in the wrong place. The 916 one?
Mm-hmm. Yep. Perfect.
Okay, I can't do two things at once, so
We do apologize, folks, for the audio difficulties. We're going to get that resolved right now. Sarah's going to dial in, and hopefully that'll help with the sound.
Pin.
I don't think you'll need it. Did you put in the access code, Sarah?
Yeah.
There's folks for getting Sarah on a landline to help with the audio. She should be on in a minute or so, I believe.
I can hear you. Can you hear me?
Yes, perfect.
Okay,
I'm
great.
guessing
Sorry
you're
about
on your
that,
phone.
guys.
No problem.
Okay. So on the same theme of trying not to talk too much and staying positive, one question that can get you into trouble and going on too long is when they say, "Tell me about yourself." You want to answer to that until after you've heard their priorities. So what you might say is, in my case, I don't know what job I'd be going for, but I might say something like, well, I've optioned human resources related jobs. I first started doing this and this, and then I moved over into career development and career coaching, which I really love. Excited about this job at IExec, working for you. Could you tell me a little bit more about why you're thinking of hiring a career coach, or what are the things you want the career coach to work on first, or I don't know what, just something that would turn it back to them ahead of time can be really helpful, because you kind of know what are some of the questions to ask that they'll be interested in answering, and it won't look like you're just trying to learn about what their most important things to them are in the person that they hire for this job. And again, I think starting positively. And so when they say, "Tell me about yourself," if you tend to not be positive, it's always good to say something like, "I've been very fortunate in my education and my career." And then answer accordingly, and it will help you present everything in a very positive light. And always refer back to the job. So you might say, if it's a sales job, you might say, been in roles that had a strong client relationship, business development, or sales aspect to them. And that's why I'm so interested here at Verizon, because I think it would be really help me use all my technical knowledge and my sales skills to help sell Android phones to the street or whatever the job is, right? So there's some reason we always bring it back to them, because in a way, if it's not relevant to that job, it's almost not relevant. You know, I kind of joke that if President Obama, after he retired, wanted to work in a pie shop, then his experience of baked pies in junior high might actually be much more relevant than being president of the United States. So you really need to be tailoring it to the job, and that's kind of all they care about on some level. If there are questions that generally suggest that you write out your answers ahead of time, especially those around transition, because those are always tough. You know, why you left here, why you did this, and practice them with a coach or with a friend. I mean, you have a feeling you're not doing it well. Try and do it on film and take a look at it. One challenge that, you know, it sounds like maybe most of you have is unemployment. And so you want to talk about it as positively as possible. One tip that I suggest is that you can say that you just started looking. So I tease my clients and I say, gosh, you know, until you were working with me, it wasn't really job hunting. So it's completely correct, even if someone started quite a while ago. The reason for that is you kind of want to look like a winner. So if you've been looking for a year or two, the employer might think, I mean, ideally they would think the person might be good at their job, they're probably not a great job hunter, or they might think, well, it's been a really bad economy. They might think whatever, but they're likely to think, what's wrong with you? Other than maybe you're not the world's greatest job hunter, but you might be excellent at what you do. So it's always better to say that you started looking relatively going well, and that you're having lots of meetings. So some of you might think, I'm not having lots of interviews. What are you talking about? That's just lying. But job search methods, and you're starting to network really well, you will be having lots of meetings. They may not all be job interviews, but you're not saying they're job interviews. You're just implying you're having lots. So you just want to sound as positive as you can and figure out a way to make it true. So if you're not even having lots of networking meetings, then let's start setting those up, and then it will be true. So it's important that for those of you that haven't had a lot of training in the hidden job market and how to set up exploratory meetings and informational interviews, and really it is very important that you learn that, because basically most of your interviews are going to come through that process for most of you. The people that can use traditional job search methods exclusively are people that have been exactly what they were last doing and have not had a lot of unusual career challenges, and have worked at brand name firms and gone to brand name school. Now, I know a lot of you, or all of you, I suppose, have gone to brand name school, but it doesn't mean that you've necessarily been working for companies that are a household name doing exactly what you'll be doing next. It's that recruiters and some job site boards, you know, are going to pick first. So if that's not you, in addition to those things, you want to also be really tapping out the hidden job market. Alex?
Yeah, we do. We have a couple. Let me ask one here. One question that came in was, how do you answer the question, why this company, especially when it's difficult to find what makes the company different from perhaps some other competitors? How would you go about doing that?
Well, when in doubt, just make something up. They won't know the difference. But I think it really is, and talk to somebody at another firm. So it's actually if it's a decent size, if it's a really small company, they might not be as likely to ask that, because you would a big company. You can get on LinkedIn. I'm a huge LinkedIn fan, as some of you know. You can get on LinkedIn and you can put the company name in. And now I used to say to put it in the, now I tell everyone to put it into the advanced people search, because they give you more choices in that section. So if the company is say Bank of America, then you would put that in the advanced people search. And what will come up is any connections you have to people at the company, including former employees. And former employees are a great group of people to talk to. And you certainly don't have to take all their time. You could certainly call and say, you know, what is the self-image of, you know, people at Bank of America versus people at other firms. Also do the same thing with whoever you would consider their competitors. So it might be some parts of the bank, might be JP Morgan Chase, perhaps. And you can try and find people who did this similar role in that area. And because you're looking for such a limited amount of information, you might even be able to approach a stranger and just say, hey, I have the JP Morgan, and you know, you don't have close connection on LinkedIn. They still may answer you in that case. But I think if you, and I would never hesitate to just Google. I'm amazed at how often I can ask a very specific question and get an answer on Google these days. Just something I can't believe that it works. You know, like reputation of blah 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 blah, and you might actually get something to say.
Great, great. And then we had a couple questions that came in regarding phone interviews. One particular attendee said, you know, they're based up in the, on the East Coast. They're looking for interviews, looking for positions on the West Coast. So they've been having to overcome the phone interview barrier. Another attendee also said that they find it kind of hard to make a personal connection and really gauge what the interviewer is really feeling from the call. Any tips, any insights that you can provide in regards to phone interviews?
Yeah, well, I'll change. I actually was going to get to phone interviews, but
Okay.
I can just stress it a bit now. The most important thing is seriously, and to take the interviewer very seriously. And I'm shocked at the casual, dismissive way that some of my clients will talk about, you know, a phone interview maybe with an HR person at the firm, and they'll say, oh, I just have to get through the phone screen with the HR girl. And right there, I know they're doomed. So you want to take it very seriously. You want to research that person. And often they may be a very young person doing that phone screen. At that moment, they're the center of your world. They control whether you're going to work at that firm. So to the extent that you research that interview the same way you always would, another thing that people forget to do is to make small talk the same way you would in a real interview. Like they think because it's on the phone, you've got to rush it. So I would try and, I've done this a few times with people. So somebody had an interview with a woman. She was a recruiter at Google. She was from Michigan. And there wasn't a lot on her, but we found more on friends on Facebook. So I thought, well, she's probably very friendly. So ask her about how she likes Michigan and, you know, does she work in the office or does she work remotely, and just chat with her. How long has she worked at Google? You know, we thought of like, there wasn't a lot of stuff to say, but we came up with a few things. And I think that people are really amazed. Now, if it's with a hiring manager, you know, it's all the same thing. But I think when it's with HR, people often are more likely to not take the person as seriously as they should. And the other thing is, obviously, you want to be on a landline if you possibly can. You want silence behind you. You want all the phones turned off. And the other thing is to practice on the phone. So you should do practice interviews on the phone with people. When we do our job search groups in the morning on Tuesdays, we had one this morning, we regularly have remote people on the phone. Now we're doing them on webinars so they can see everybody. Well, it's a great for their country, or they have a very low voice, or some reason why I think they might be hard to understand. I always ask the phone people, did you catch that? Did you catch her name? Could you repeat it? And they're often like, no, not really. And it helps people know that they're not talking clearly. Another thing is you definitely want to talk a little slower than you normally would. Very important. Too fast, you might lose them, and if you lose them, it's all over. And if you lose them on the phone, it's worse because they're really lost because they can start like doing their email. So you kind of want to work extra hard to be very interesting at the beginning. See, that's when those phrases probably, so you might say something, everything you say you want to try and link back to them because when they hear their name or you say things, I would imagine you might feel this way as well when blah, 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 blah. Then suddenly the person's going to listen. So you have to work really hard at that part. And I definitely suggest that you try recording yourself as well, sound like on the phone. But ideally just practicing with someone on the phone is the best way to go.
Perfect. Great.
So I think, and then the last tip for the phone is even more important to not talk too long in a row. To pause and let them redirect because you can't see if they're listening or not. Kind of like doing a webinar. Is there another question, or should I go on?
Why don't we go on? We have a couple more questions. Maybe we can circle back to them near the end of the presentation.
Okay, that sounds good. So addressing, we talked about the period of unemployment. Same idea with addressing a layoff. Even if it's not, I mean, obviously you never can lie about facts, dates, salaries, responsibilities, etc. But things a little bit. You know, nobody can prove that you're exaggerating how much you loved something or how much you valued your old boss. No one can know. And to the extent that you can be as positive as possible, you're just going to be more appealing. And ideally, you want to be seeing everything from the company's point of view to the extent when they laid you off, right, or even if they fired you for what they thought was cause, they thought it was the right thought. This is the absolute best thing to do, was for you to no longer work there. Now, they may have changed their mind an hour later when they realized how much work you did, whatever, but at the moment, it was a good business decision from their point of view. And you want to be presenting everything as if you think like management, you're on their side, even if you are management, like senior management, you know, even more senior management. So ideally, you want to present it from their point of view. So you would start, you would compliment your boss and almost agree with the decision. So I had someone this morning, she was awesome. She got laid off yesterday. They eliminated her position, her boss's position, somebody else's position. It was a small company that's not that small, but that's struggling, and they basically killed the marketing department. She just learned this Monday, and she's at the group Tuesday morning, and she did it. She just did this beautifully. She said, so she was practicing this question about the last year, and she said, well, I've been working at this company, and she, said the name, and she said, oh, the reason that I left them is they were not doing so well financially and really made a very important, difficult decision that they really needed to cut expenses dramatically. And they actually more or less cut the marketing department at that point. So they shut down the group and they eliminated quite a few other positions. But given their current situation, I really think it was a good idea. And if they can cut costs, they'll have some time to bring things around and blah, blah, blah. And she said it much better than that because it was hard for me to say without talking about what the company and the company what they do. But she said it like she believed it. And it sounded so positive. And so it doesn't mean you have to say, oh, and, being unemployed is the best thing that ever happened to me. But you can say, I guess unfortunately for me that it really made sense for them to eliminate the blah, blah, blah division. However, as it turns out, the economy is really picking up. I'm getting lots of meetings. I think it's going to work out very well. And it's always great to say that you're in touch with your old team. I just had yesterday, and they're turning things around. It's really going quite well. Or I just had drinks with the team, last week. And you might want to make it sound like it was really hard for them to let you go, and they love you and value you, and, they're practically thinking about bringing you back. That's kind of the idea that you want to be putting across. To the extent that you possibly can. And always, make it sound like, other people may be struggling in this economy, but you're actually fine. You're quite fortunate. Things are going well. because that's attractive to the person that is doing well in spite of a difficult situation. Other added tips, like these are kind of the things that can help you go from good to great. So I've talked a lot about not talking about yourself and not trying to sell yourself on how great you are. But at the second half of the meeting, you certainly want to be saying a few key things about your accomplishments that are relevant to the things they want the person in this job to accomplish, and only if it's that. So a couple of little things that can just make you look good in a general way is people tend to think that if you like something, you're good at it. So somebody told me that they liked nothing more than reading balance statements about companies. And that just fascinated them, and analyzing them fascinated them, and they do it at home on the weekend. I would probably conclude, regardless of what else I might conclude, that they would probably be good at it, and that I could trust them to do a good job reading balance sheets. So you always want to talk about how you love what you do, because it just sounds good. Well, as an HR person, I think I'm supposed to be against workaholism, but deep down, I want my employees to be workaholics. Everybody does. You know, we might have not approved of it in theory, but there's nothing greater than a competent, talented, workaholic employee who's going to be good and, do tons of work and always be there. So any stories that you have that are true, or you're telling a story, and ideally you can combine these. Oh, we got to up reading balance statements till 4 in the morning, and discovered this wonderful thing and made the company million. So you're talking about how you got lost in your work. Anything where you're showing that you worked all night, that you went the extra mile, is always attractive to people, even if they think it shouldn't be. And the other thing is any stories that you have that show that you had particularly good people skills. Not you just saying you have good people skills, but maybe let's say you worked for somebody that everyone knows is famous for being difficult, and you had some story where you could show that while other people had trouble getting along with them, you did okay with them. So, the reason I spent so much time in Nebraska is we had this client in Nebraska who just didn't like anyone, and for some reason he liked me. So I was constantly going out and blah, 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 that type of thing. Those are things that just tend to reassure people. So these are just some ways you can tell those stories a little bit to show your genuine enthusiasm and interest in the topic of the job. And then we talked a little bit about questions you can ask to get them going. I'm not sure that these are like the world's greatest questions or anything, but the first one you might not want to ask in these words, but you want to get an answer to this as soon as possible. What are the top priorities for the new hire in the first 3 months, in the year? Because the more you're talking about the work that the person will be doing in the job, and they see you talking about it and they're having this discussion and this exploration of the work that the candidate will be doing when they're hired, they're picturing you doing it. And they're picturing they're with you, and it's making them feel good. Because that's why they're hiring, because they need somebody to do this work. It's as if, I'm standing here with my arms full of groceries. And if you're talking about how you love to carry groceries, and you're discussing all the ways, how quickly you're going to grab those groceries for me, and how you can take the ball and run with it, I'm going to be thrilled, because I'm hiring you either because there's too much work and I'm doing it, or my team's doing it, or it's being done badly by someone, and it's causing problems, or that it's not being done at all and it's not causing problems, but we're missing an opportunity. We could be, pursuing some business development if someone was there. And any of those scenarios are fabulous to me, because I want this job done, right? The more we're talking about the job, and by asking me questions about the job, you're showing me that you understand it. People don't realize that you can show just knowledge and brains and interest by asking astute, pointed questions to help explore the job, changing what you say based on what I just said, exploring these ideas and tasks and situations. You can show me how much you get it, and how much you get me, and how much you get the company, as by telling me about your accomplishments, which you do. Don't get me wrong, you do that. But I just know you're always going to do that anyway, so I'm not focusing on that so much. So from any interview, and any informational interview too, is with a real understanding of the department. Especially with exploratory meetings, you want to know who works for me, who my peers are, who our competition is, exactly how everything's structured. So that will kind of help you understand how you might fit into the organization, how you might help me, or who might be. So you want to ask a lot of questions, almost like you're trying to suss out the org chart in the discussion. So it will help you figure out how you can be the one to save the day. We better hurry up a little bit here. I have a few more after this, but you definitely want to close positively and put in the person's mind the next meeting. So you want to discuss it. If they mention maybe meeting some other people, try and get them to tell you who those other people's names are. So if later they drop the ball because they get busy, you can try and get meetings with those people on your own some other way. If you want to try and get their names, you want to get everybody's cards, you can send them a thank you email right away. 24 hours, I think, is really great. 48 hours at the absolute most to get your thank you letters in. And by the way, they're not just thank you letters. They're detailed discussions based on what you guys talked about, exploring the role some more. Very thoughtful. They should take time, and they should be very different for each person. But definitely explore the next steps and kind of repeat them. And again, this slide is everything to me. Who gets hired is the candidate that is more likable. If they don't like you, they're not going to hire you. And if all you do is make them like you in the first meeting, that may be enough to get another meeting, at which point you can show how skilled you are. So that's huge in the first meeting, and that you fit in with the corporate culture. You do want to wow the interviewer with a particular success or two, something relevant. But the last bullet, you want to be focusing very acutely on what's important to the person making the hiring decision. And if other candidates are just selling themselves in a generic way, you'll have the in. And then we're almost out of time, Alex, so maybe I should, is there any question I should answer now? I don't know if you want to go over a little bit. I don't have too much more. But
yeah, if we do have two questions. Do you want to very quickly finish up the rest of your slides, Sarah, before we go to those questions?
Sure. So about the reference process, it's very important. Now, it's gotten a little bit vaguer now because people can just call up anyone from your company that they find on LinkedIn. So you can't count on them only calling the people that you give them. But you want to make very sure that you've warmed them up early on, that you keep them updated about your search, that they have a copy of your resume, but also when you get near the end of the process and you really think it's quite likely they'll be called about a particular role, that you give them extra information. You call them up, you prep them. If you suspect that they are worried that your quantitative skills aren't that great or your writing skills aren't that great, to really stress that and give them an example they could mention. Really prep them. And then thank them like crazy. I mean, I used to send gifts to people because it's kind of a pain to be someone's reference, and I want them to love being my reference or keep being my reference, right? And the other thing is people don't update people who help them when they get the job and thank them properly. I'm horrified by how often that happens. A paid coach, so theoretically, you don't owe me anything because you paid me to tell me when you get a job if later, you worked with me for a while and then you feel like you've got it, you're working on your own, and then you get a job. They don't tell me. And I'm thinking, and often when I find out, I'll be like, did you tell everyone else? And often they didn't. They didn't thank people. Other people helped them for free. Very important because you want to be building goodwill for your, the rest of your career. Alex, I just saw your note about speaking a little louder. Is that now, or is that a while ago?
Yeah, it's actually, I think it was a little while ago, but I think we should be fine.
Okay.
If you don't mind,
I feel like I'm always so loud, right?
So
so we talked about the thank you. We talked about this. It's for phone interviews. The other thing is don't rush off the phone. To really end it, do all that closing stuff, set up next steps, and write thank you letters just like any other interviewer, even if it was with a young recruiter. Take it seriously. And, very short periods of time in a row talking, not like me now. We talked about recruiters are people too, and take it very seriously. If it's an external recruiter and you're senior, or even if you're not, talk to them like they're the center of your universe. So ask them how their business is going, ask about their other searches, see if you can help them with another search, make all the same small talk. And of course, remember, they don't work for you. You're just the product. You're not their client. And don't relax too much. Some recruiters are really good, and they get you to relax, and they say the wrong thing and eliminate yourself. Easy to do. Again, mock interviews are very important. If you can afford a coach, I say work with a coach. If you can't, you can get a friend to help you. You can even get a friend to film you. Sometimes alumni career services at your school can help. And like I said, if you can afford coaching, I definitely think it pays for itself, especially if you suspect you're not good at this. Just a little bit of coaching can go a long way to correct small things. So that is about it for me, but I am happy to answer a couple questions.
Sure, absolutely. We have a couple questions here before we close out. Let's see, the first one is, what if perhaps your profile does not meet all of the job requirements? Say perhaps it meets 70%, but you feel really confident in your performance and your ability to really be successful with that company and in that particular position. Do you have any recommendations for how someone could sell themselves?
Are we assuming that they did get the meeting?
I'm assuming that they got the meeting. Yeah. Let's assume that you do have the meeting, you have the interview, but you do anticipate this coming up as a potential concern.
Well, I would try and look at the underlying concern. So first of all, if there's any way you can get even the tiniest bit of knowledge about the topic beforehand, even if you haven't done it, I think that's very helpful. So if I would prefer, let's say they wanted an MBA, but I've got a Master's of Financial Engineering. Maybe they're not familiar with that degree. So I would prep up how I have all those same skill sets and have a way to answer that if it could be a concern. Let's say they want someone who's done you've done a lot of the job, let's say it's a marketing job, you've done a lot of the job, but you haven't done a lot of social networking in a corporate job. Then I would just try and prep all you can about it. So find out about what they're doing in social networking, find out what their competition is doing. Just try and cram them on the topic. And if you can't create the years of work experience, but you can create the appearance of knowledge about the topic, up with parallel accomplishments that would address the underlying concern. So let's say they want you to have a CFA in this job ideally, preferably a CFA. You don't have to read that, right? And you don't, but you have all this other stuff. What I think they're really concerned about is that they want the CFA for the knowledge, but they also want it for the credibility. So to the extent that you go in with a lot of gravitas, clearly having a lot of understanding of the market and economics and all the financial principles that you learn getting a CFA, which I don't even know what all of them are, you might allay my concern because you have all the things I wanted someone to have a CFA for. And so you just might want to lay that on extra thick, kind of. So let's say it was an HR position and they wanted an MBA. They might want the MBA to make sure that you understood business, but they also might want to just make sure you have strong quantitative skills so that you'll be good managing the 401k, or you'll be good with the comp, or you'll just know how to use Excel or whatever. So you would just go in showing that kind of thing very strongly and lay that on a bit thicker. You kind of you want to just distract them as best you can from those things, and of course sell all the rest of it very strongly. But you also want to not do any of that early on, though. So you still want to go through this exploratory process, because it may turn out that they wrote that because that's what they wrote in the last job description, but they don't even care about it. You don't want to go on non-protesting too much when it turns out they didn't even care and they think MBAs are stupid or whatever.
Great. And then another question that came up is, let's just say it's an individual who's been out of the job market for a little over a year as she was delivering and taking care of her. How do you explain that you've been out for so long and still sound like you're ready to go back to work and really hit the ground running?
Well, I think that really varies per person, and I think that sometimes you don't have to explain it that much. In other words, you can explain it in a fairly vague way, and if you kind of change this, you answer it in some vague way, change the subject to something in a very interesting way, that you can kind of keep the discussion off that. So you might say, I mean, I'd have to kind of talk to the person to figure out what they should do in that case, because there might be an alternative explanation. It maybe they just go with the truth. And I think that if they have a lot of knowledge about the market, they've been following the company or following their competitors, and they just sound very current, and they've had a lot of informational meetings in this space, then they will sound current, and people won't focus on as much. If they've just talked to someone, other people in the firm, they've just had a meeting with someone at a competitor, and, they're saying, oh, I just met with someone over there, and they're not quite as far along with you, and blah, 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 blah. You guys are doing an amazing job. Tell me, blah, 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 what are your plans for this? Suddenly you're just busy talking about the business, the development of the business, and hopefully you'll be almost distracting from that. There's nothing wrong with saying you've been home with kids, so I think because everyone wants a workaholic, it's not always ideal to announce that you have a small baby because, sometimes that does make it a little harder to work very long hours. So while there's nothing wrong with that and it's illegal to discriminate, it's maybe not a great thing to lead with right at the beginning if there's a better story. If there isn't, it really would depend on the person and how to present yourself, what the ideal thing is. I think it's very individual.
Gotcha, gotcha. And then maybe we can close out on this one final question for career changers. Do you have any advice on how to maximize the chances of getting an interview if you're looking to go from one area to another, given that perhaps you don't have any relevant experience in your past that applies to this new role that you're looking to enter into?
I think the most important thing to do is just completely stop applying for jobs online or any of that, because you're just not going to get picked. So if you just eliminate that from your plans, it will make your life so much better. So then you're just trying to get an interview through connections. And, I'm a huge fan of LinkedIn as a way to do that, using your alumni networks, using your friends. One exercise that can be helpful for career changers, it's kind of random, but to just make a list of the 10 people that are the biggest fans of your work, wherever they are, whatever they're doing. People who just think you did a great job at anything, when you were working for them or with them. And really thinking about where are they, because those kind of people can give such a strong recommendation to you, to someone at their firm, even if it's in a different area of their firm. That sometimes you can get a meeting just based on that without really having to sell yourself to get the meeting. So then when you're in the meeting, then you've got to show them why they should hire you. But when I write introductory letters for people, for clients, to try and get them meetings with people, I don't stress the person's skills at all. Like half the time I don't even get into it. I just am asking a favor based on our relationship. And I make the first half of the letter all about them and how are they doing, what they're doing, blah, 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 and their firm, and everything about them, very little about me and very little about the person who I want them to meet with. I'm just asking them to meet with them. But I've establishing our bond of our friendship or our professional relationship. I've shown a lot of interest in them. And then I do make sure whatever I do say about the person isn't just how great they are, but why they want to meet with this person, why they're interested in something very specific to their interest in the person and the company and the role. And they don't even have to have any particular qualifications to get the meeting. And that's the way it happens. Then when they meet you, hopefully they fall in love with your fabulousness, and you slowly talk them into why they should hire you to do something a little different than what you've been doing.
Absolutely. Wonderful, wonderful. But I believe we could probably go on and on for a couple more hours here with this really interesting topic, but I think we'll kind of put it to a close now. And before we do close out, I want to thank everyone, for those of you sticking around all the way up to 7:45. I'd appreciate it. Those of you in New York, on the East Coast, and it's certainly a really wonderful topic that really, I think, has really been shown by the fact that we've had a record turnout for a webinar. We had a little over 100 people attend. Sarah, I'm not sure if you're able to see the actual number, but which is a great turnout. And just to close out before we do, I do want to make sure that everyone does understand that Sarah is someone that has really been a great contributor to IExec over the past few months, and we certainly recommend those of you who are members of IExec to learn a little bit more about Sarah by going to her website and learning a little bit more about her services. And as a follow-up to the actual webinar tonight, we'll actually send you a link to the full recording of the webinar in case you'd like to review any of the content that was shared. And certainly we'll have our contact information there in case you'd like to contact us here at IExec with any specific questions. We'll certainly share Sarah's contact information as well if you'd like to connect with her directly. And I think that's about it. And so before we close out, I want to again thank everyone for attending our webinar tonight. And we hope to see you at our next one. Goodbye, everyone.